Have you ever noticed something unusual? Felt that nagging sensation in the back of your mind that something wasn't quite right, but convinced yourself it was nothing? Today, I want to share a story that demonstrates just how critical it is to pay attention to those warning signs we so often dismiss. This is a tale about observation, consequences, and the lessons we can learn when we choose to listen to what the world is trying to tell us. Our story takes place in a small manufacturing facility on the outskirts of a bustling industrial town. The Riverside manufacturing plant had been operating smoothly for over 15 years, producing components for various machinery. The facility employed about 50 people, and everyone took pride in their safety record. They had gone nearly a decade without a serious incident, which made them something of a model in their industry. But as we often see in life, success can sometimes breed complacency, and it was this very complacency that would eventually lead to a situation that could have been entirely prevented. The first signs. It started subtly, as most problems do. Marcus, one of the senior maintenance technicians, noticed something during his routine inspection one Tuesday morning. A support beam near the main production floor showed a hairline crack. It was small, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus made a note of it in his inspection log and mentioned it to his supervisor, James. "How serious is it?" James asked, glancing at the report. "Hard to say," Marcus replied honestly. "It's minor right now, but these things can develop. I'd recommend we get a structural engineer to take a look." James nodded, but his mind was already on other matters. The plant was in the middle of fulfilling a major order, and bringing in an outside inspector would mean shutting down part of the production floor for at least a day, maybe more. The crack was tiny, after all. Surely it could wait a few weeks until after the rush. This was the first mistake. Prioritizing short-term convenience over long-term safety. The pattern emerges over the following weeks. Other signs began to appear. Several employees reported hearing unusual sounds from the area near the beam during operation, hours of faint creaking that had even been there before. One worker, Sarah, even brought it up during the weekly safety meeting. "I'm probably being overly cautious," she said. "But has anyone else noticed that sound coming from the ceiling near Station 5? A few heads nodded in agreement. The safety coordinator made a note, but assured everyone that maintenance had already documented the issue and it was being monitored. The word monitored gave everyone a false sense of security. After all, if it was being monitored, surely someone was taking care of it, right? This is a common psychological phenomenon called diffusion of responsibility. When we believe someone else is handling a problem, we feel less compelled to take action ourselves. Everyone assumed that because the issue had been reported and acknowledged, it was under control. The escalation. Another month passed. The crack had grown not dramatically, but noticeably to anyone who had been watching it closely. Marcus documented the change and once again approached his supervisor. This time, he was more insistent. "James, this really needs professional assessment. The crack has expanded, and I'm concerned about load-bearing capacity." James looked at the updated report and sighed. He was under pressure from upper management to maintain production target. The plant was performing exceptionally well financially, and any disruption could impact quarterly results. He made a decision that seemed reasonable at the moment, but would later prove to be critical. "Let's get through this quarter," he said. "We'll schedule the inspection for early next quarter when things slow down. In the meantime, can you just keep an eye on it?" Marcus wasn't entirely comfortable with this response, but he also understood the business pressures his supervisor faced. He agreed, but the uneasy feeling in his gut remained. What's particularly instructive about this situation is how it reflects a broader organizational culture. The Riverside plant wasn't a bad workplace, far from it. Management genuinely cared about their employees, But over time, a subtle shift had occurred in how people communicated about problems. Success had created an environment where raising concerns felt like questioning the competence of the team. When you have a 15-year safety record, suggesting that something might be wrong can feel like you're being unnecessarily negative or fearful. Nobody wants to be seen as the person who cries wolf or slows down productivity over minor issues. Several employees had noticed the warning signs, but remained silent, assuming someone else would speak up or that their observation wasn't important enough to mention. This phenomena, known as organizational silence, is remarkably common in workplaces and can have serious consequences. The breaking point: 2 months after Marcus first identified the crack, the situation reached a critical point. During a particularly busy afternoon, with machinery running at full capacity, the stress on the compromised beam finally exceeded its limits. Workers heard a loud crack that echoed across the production floor. Thanks to one quick-thinking employee who immediately activated the emergency stop protocol, everyone evacuated the area swiftly and safely. The beam didn't completely fail, but it sagged dangerously, and engineers later confirmed that a catastrophic collapse had been only minutes away. No one was hurt. The emergency response worked exactly as designed, but the plant had to shut down completely for 3 weeks while structural repairs were made. The financial impact was substantial, far greater than what a proactive inspection and repair would have cost. More importantly, the psychological impact on the workforce was significant. Trust had been shaken. The lessons learned in the aftermath, the company conducted a thorough review of what had happened. What they discovered was enlightening and led to significant changes in how they operated. First, they recognized that warning signs are only useful if people feel empowered to act on them. They implemented a new policy where any employee could trigger a safety review without needing management approval. If someone saw something concerning, they had the authority to pause operations until it was assessed. Second, they acknowledged that business pressures should never override safety considerations. They created a dedicated safety budget that couldn't be reduced or redirected, regardless of production demands. Third, they worked to change the cultural attitude toward raising concerns. They celebrated people who identified potential problems, even if those problems turned out to be minor. They wanted to encourage vigilance, not discourage it. The universal application. While this story takes place in a manufacturing setting, the lessons apply universally. How often do we ignore warning signs in our own lives? A persistent pain we convince ourselves will go away. A relationship problem we keep postponing addressing. A financial issue we tell ourselves we'll deal with next month. A strange noise in our car that we're sure isn't serious. Warning signs exist for a reason. They're nature's way in human systems. Reality's way of giving us a chance to address problems while they're still manageable. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. It simply allows them to grow until they can no longer be ignored. The story of the Riverside manufacturing plant reminds us that prevention is always preferable to reaction. The cost of addressing the beam issue proactively would have been minimal compared to the eventual consequences. More importantly, the stress, worry, and potential danger could have been entirely avoided. The next time you notice something unusual, experience that nagging feeling that something isn't quite right, or hear yourself saying, "I'm probably just being paranoid." Pause. Ask yourself, what would happen if you're right? What would it cost to investigate versus what it might cost to ignore? Warning signs are gifts. The question isn't whether we'll encounter them, we all will. The question is, will we have the courage and wisdom to pay attention when we do?